what is the role of nutrition in cognitive health? Here is an example of key micronutrients and how it supports a healthy brain so it can stay active and vibrant. Before I get into that, I just want to share a little bit about this cross-section of brain that you see in front of you. The brain is about 3 pounds. It's one of our most amazing organs. It's what helps us think, feel, and do, and really be ourselves. And in this 3-pound organ, 75% is water, fluids, 25% is matter, or solids. Of that matter, 40% is gray matter, which is mostly the cell body of the neurons. And then 60% is going to be white matter. This is myelin sheath. It's a fatty substance that coats a part of the neuron. Now, we used to think that white myelin sheath, that white matter, we used to think it was simply protective padding. We didn't know what else it did. We didn't think it did much. But we now know that it is also very active and a part of keeping the brain running smoothly. So the gray matter is responsible for sending out signals to the rest of the body, but the white matter are the roads that those messages travel on. White matter is what allows the body and the brain to communicate, signals going back and forth. The white matter is what helps information travel efficiently, quickly, and correctly. In the brain, in total, we are talking about 171 billion cells. That is a lot of cells that need good nutrition support. And so here are just some of the key micronutrients that help do that. B vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, and zinc. And then further on the right of the slide, you see 4 key mechanisms that are at play here. Neurotransmitter synthesis. These are the chemical messengers that are sending those signals throughout the body. Neuronal membrane and receptor modification. This is important to regulate that communication, keeping the lines of communication nice and clear. Energy metabolism. These micronutrients are very important in terms of energy metabolism. This is important because the brain is a hungry organ. It's one of our most metabolically active organs that demands 20% of all oxygen and calories. 1 in every 5 calories goes to the brain. So efficient energy metabolism is important for fueling it right. And finally, homocysteine metabolism. Homocysteine is that amino acid that when levels are high, it's linked to higher rates of inflammation, oxidative stress, and reduced methylation. And we need methylation so that we can produce neurotransmitters. These are just some of the ways that micronutrients are essential to how the brain functions. I like to stay positive when it comes to nutrition, but sometimes it is helpful to look at things from the other point of view. Sometimes it's helpful to know what good nutrition is preventing. So let's take a look here at what happens when these same key micronutrients, vitamins and minerals, are too low. What happens to the brain? What happens to those 171 billion cells? When we don't have enough of these micronutrients, we see clear consequences. Memory loss, difficulty concentrating, confusion, and accelerated brain aging, accelerated cognitive decline. Just a couple classic examples. A vitamin B12 deficiency will show up as dementia, and a niacin deficiency will show up as memory loss. These are just a couple examples. So that's deficiency. But what about insufficiency? Before we reach deficiency, are we still at risk? This graph indicates that we do. This is a standard that's based out of the US that measures EAR and RDA, and I'll explain what those are. The estimated average requirement, that's EAR, that's how much of a nutrient we need so that we meet the needs of about 50% of the population. whereas the RDA is a recommended dietary allowance. That level is set so that we're meeting 97 to 98% of the needs of the population. Keep in mind that the RDA is set to avoid deficiency. It's not necessarily to create a thriving body, but just to avoid deficiency. So in fact, some data indicate we might even need more, but let's start with this. So what I want to point out to you on this slide, follow this red line that goes down and then back up. So when micronutrients are either very, very low or very, very high, there can be risk of adverse events. When we are looking at deficiency, you've got just about 100% chance that you will feel it with some kind of negative symptom. That's the teal line. But when you get into the pink bar, you'll see that as you near deficiency, even at the estimated average requirement, you are still at pretty high risk for an adverse effect. And that's before we get to deficiency. So insufficiency or inadequacy is also something that we need to watch out for. Now, in developed countries, there are two main groups that are going to be at risk for insufficiencies. Deficiencies do tend to be less common in developed nations, which is why we're looking at insufficiencies. So one of these groups is related to lifestyle. We've got busy, young to middle-aged adults with demanding lifestyles that may require more protective and supportive micronutrients to help them cope with that busy lifestyle. Or maybe that busy lifestyle means they aren't eating the foods that supply all of those nutrients they need. The other group is based on life stage, and this is older adults. And there are many reasons why older adults may not be getting the nutrition they need. We'll talk about that in a second. So micronutrient inadequacies, as you can imagine, may be more common than deficiencies. In developed nations, deficiency isn't the biggest problem. Really, insufficiencies are. On this slide is one example of a nutrient that is at lower levels than it should be in the Middle East, vitamin D. So you see that women, especially pregnant women, as well as older adults, they all fall short on vitamin D. Now, this is just an example of one nutrient that tends to be lower than it should be. And what I want you to think about when you see this slide is that this represents a hidden hunger. So again, we all know what traditional hunger is. It cannot be ignored. Maybe your stomach is making some noises. You need to feed your body. You know how to do that. That's traditional hunger. Hidden hunger is more complicated because it's silent. It doesn't demand to be addressed. And this is why it's really important for pharmacists as well as dietitians to understand that this hidden hunger can exist when there is a gap between the nutrients we get and the nutrients we need. That way we can educate and provide solutions that are practical for our patients. So the bottom line is that your patients may be suffering from silent hidden hunger of micronutrients.